And this paper is not theoretical. This paper is more descriptive, analytical than theoretical, and deals with my current book project. And I would like to start with 2 citations. Because I sheltered Jews, forest bands destroyed my farm and took away my 2 horses, a cart and pigs. They visited me 9 times. I ask you, this woman writes to Jewish community in Warsaw, for a positive attitude towards my request and to offer me financial aid so that I will be able to buy a horse. Without a horse, I cannot run my farm. Helena Sadowska, a selfless rescuer from Jastkowo near Łomża, she wrote this letter in 1947. I will be talking about her later on. And another second citation from a letter of a rescued Jew. I was hidden in the attic in the straw. I could not make any movements there, nor go down to their home because other farmers, and she means in Ponikla, that she doesn't include, knew me. We live in constant stress and fear because of the frequent Nazi searches and the uncovering of hidden Jews in nearby villages. They sheltered me in a great secret and brought me food 3 times a day, risking their lives. They were all very kind and caring towards me. This citation comes from a letter written by Felicia Raskin-Nowakowa, a young adult Holocaust survivor, and she wrote this letter to the Jewish committee in Warsaw on March 6, 1947. She was already actually married at the time. She was married to a military man, but she maintained, when she wrote this letter to the Jewish committee, that she herself doesn't have the means to help her rescuers. But she was concerned about the Zaleski, that's the name of that man, well-being, and disturbed by the knowledge of the losses the family had incurred in the aftermath of the war as a result of hiding her. She was fully aware of just how precarious was the Zaleskis' social standing in the village, and that the family, though in need, would avoid direct contact with Jewish organizations for fear of further repercussions from their neighbors. So, therefore, in that letter, Felicia requested that the help, material help, offered to the family will be sent directly to her, and she will arrange to send it somehow to the Zaleski's family. That the Jewish organization will not come to the Zaleski's family directly, because that would mean the end of them in that village. The end of them. So these 2 citations are good illustrations of the chief primary sources I investigate in my current book project on the history and memory of the rescuers of Jews in Poland in the light of early post-war correspondence. This large correspondence, numbering 500 letters, petitions and accompanying notes, written between late 1944 and 1949, is deposited in the Jewish Historical Institute in Warsaw. Most of these letters were addressed to the newly established Jewish organizations and institutions in Poland, the Central Committee of Polish Jews, the American Joint Distribution Committee, and to the little-known Warsaw-based Committee of Pomocy Polakom, Committee to Aid the Poles, are also known as Committee to Aid the Aryans. So the use of the term that was used during the time of war. Established on the initiative of William Bain, second director of the Warsaw branch of JOIN, with the assistance of Central Committee of Polish Jews. What is the nature of this correspondence? What value does it represent for historians? The majority of the correspondence consists of letters from Poles who had been involved in rescuing Jews, often requesting material or medical assistance or dental equipment or piano for professional use. Many were accompanied by testimonies from their Jewish churches or local Jewish organizations confirming the claims of the rescuer. The correspondence also includes personal and private letters of Jewish survivors and rescuers and their respective families written to each other. And these letters give us a rich tapestry of emotional, intimate attachments. Actually, I don't have the time to actually talk about them here in this presentation. A small number of writers were Polish widows of Jewish men who had been killed in the Holocaust. In the letters, they asked Jewish organizations for assistance in raising their ethnically half-Jewish children. And these letters are self-effacing. We also have a case of a letter by a girl who is born out of mixed marriage, and she identifies with in that letter with Jewishness, and she looks very pejoratively on her Polishness. I regret that I was born to a Polish mother. Yes? I'm proud of being a daughter of my Jewish father. In that collection, there are also letters written by Jewish churches, young and adults from the DP camps in Germany, asking about the whereabouts of their wartime benefactors or inquiring about well-being of their benefactors. And I cite, "Dear Mrs. Tangretova, I have had trouble in obtaining your address, but once I found it, I'm writing you instantly. As you may know from our common friends, I'm now in Bavaria in a DP camp, Lager, where I work and await future decisions regarding my life. I was lucky to get in touch with my brethren in the United States. Now I live by the one hope that soon I will meet the only remaining living family of mine in the world. Dear Mrs. Tangretova, I continuously think about you with deep gratitude. I will never forget what you did for me during the time of our great misfortune. Friends like yourself, one remembers forever. And gratitude towards you is the dearest memory of the past." The end of quote. One Polish male rescuer wrote to Jewish organizations for help in locating his Jewish wife, who ran away with her son from the marriage before the Second World War with a Jewish man. This Polish man rescued her and married her and had a child with her, and she left that child with him. And he's complaining to the Jewish organizations that the Jews came and she ran away because the Jews came and they influenced her. And this letter actually, through this letter, we are actually entering the gray zone of rescue, what I call in my research project, that also shows us the problems of relations, intimate relations, and the conditions of genocide, that women are coerced into these relationships and what happens with these relationships after the war. Now, one could argue that the correspondence alone cannot provide a comprehensive picture of the rescue of Jews during the Holocaust and needs to be viewed alongside other historical documents and placed within a broader historical context. However, in my view, in spite of their limitations, these letters and testimonies constitute an invaluable multi-voice map of rescue. They constitute rare and barely examined documentations of the relationships between the rescuers and the rescued Jews, and the rescuers and members of their local communities. I have begun my analysis of this material by asking, are the rescuers' accounts sincere and honest? Or do they include embellished accounts of rescue, or represent pure lies, or anti-Jewish sentiments? And there is a small group of letters that represent that anti-Jewish sentiments. But in the majority of cases, when the rescuers' letters are accompanied by notes written by former Jewish charges, we can speak about sincere, honest accounts, though in many ways also limited because of the form of the correspondence, its short length and matter-of-fact accounts. Sometimes one or a group of survivors signed the note on behalf of other survivors who were rescued by the same individual, but who had already left Poland. So we cannot be sure if other survivors felt the same about the rescuer as those who signed the letter confirming his or her selflessness. So once again, there is a tapestry of different attachments we can see through these letters. And some groups of rescuers, they are like two different families. So one family signs the letters. And they mentioned that another family that already is in DP camp or left for the United States. Of course, I also deal with the later post-war testimonies. In some cases, there are Jewish charges who felt very attached to the rescuers, who see this rescuer as a great person, whereas other rescued Jews who were also rescued by that person might not see the same thing. But the letters give us an insight what was important to the authors then, at that time, the early post-war period, and who were the authors of these letters, their age, level of education, social and economic status. So in some cases of rescuers from villages, we have a group of peasants who actually couldn't write. So the letters are written by the Sautis, the administrative representative of the village, and the letter is signed by X's. In some cases, actually, the rescue Jew, the former Jewish charge, writes in a more elaborative manner for 2-3 pages than the rescuer. So we have a picture, we have a greater picture, and also showing us the tapestry of emotions and the relations, what happened to that rescuer during the war through the eyes of the rescued Jew. For many of the selfless rescuers, their letters to Jewish organization was an opportunity to unburden themselves of secret and traumatic wartime experiences which they could not share with their compatriots for fear of repercussions. So we see what is very important to them at the time. For example, Katarzyna Dzierżyńska, a 70-year-old widow who was a lonely repatriate to Przemyśl in southern Poland, from the village of Radochońce in the Kresy, eastern part of Poland, wrote about losing her husband and all her possessions as punishment for sheltering 3 brothers, Jankel, Chaim and Majorko Achstein. In her statement, the letter, Dzierżyńska said that she didn't let the warnings and threats stop her from assisting the brothers, and I cite, "All 3 brothers had to hide in the forest, because in the village their lives were constantly threatened. They used to visit me in my home during nighttime, and I provided them with everything I could, bread, milk, eggs and cheese. They would put everything in a sack and run back to the forest. I helped them in this manner for 2 years and they managed to survive. When the bandits began to suspect I was helping the poor brothers, I received death threats. But I didn't pay attention to those threats and continued to help. In 1945, when the Russian army entered our village, all 3 brothers survived and were free. Unfortunately, the bandits did not forget about me. One night they paid us a visit and robbed us of everything, including the boots that we wore on our feet. A few weeks after this incident, my husband passed away out of fear. I'm a 70-year-old woman left without anything." The end of quote. Letters from members of the Polish intelligentsia express in a restrained, often covert way, embarrassment and discomfort that other members of Polish society had subjected selfless rescuers of Jews to different forms of hostility. So this is a common knowledge. Cecilia Piotrowska, an upper middle class woman, describes the destigmatization of her sister who, like her, sheltered Jews. And I quote, "I never expected any reward. Many of my acquaintances, particularly observant Catholics, did the same and for the same reason. During the Nazi terror, someone painted a Star of David on the door of my sister's apartment. This was a warning directed at her so that she would cease hiding Jews. I could say many things about those who saved Jews because of their convictions. They put their lives in danger and paid for their actions with their lives, freedom and wealth." And her letter, which is quite extended, about 8 pages, is also accompanied by an extended note by Iwo Trank, one of Piotrowska's Jewish charges. And he corroborates her statement in a manner of fact way, and he describes Piotrowska as an ideal rescuer and utters broader reflections on the state of rescue and Polish-Jewish relations during the Holocaust. And I cite, "During the time of the greatest adversity during the war, I myself experienced a lot of good in her home. I received not only moral but also material support. This was an unusual action on her part. Many Jews passed through her home, and they owed their lives to her. If there were more Poles like her, certainly more Jews would have been saved. I emphasize that she did it all for purely selfless reason. The end of quote. The letters and testimonies reveal the feelings of rescuers after the war. Feelings of social isolation, frustration, despair, and anger. They disclose the human depth and texture of their experiences. Female rescuers appear generally much more emotionally expressive than male rescuers. However, both male and female rescuers verbalize that not everyone in their local communities perceive their action as heroic or patriotic. That the environment, the neighbors, they call them Jewish uncles, Jewish aunts. And of course, this means a stigmatization of them, hostile stigmatization. Many kept their deeds secret from neighbors, colleagues, and even family out of fear of being identified as a rescuer of Jews and becoming the victim of stigmatization and physical violence or verbal violence. Here is another example. Janina Ciechocińska, who had rescued a young Jewish man, wrote, and her letter is 3 sentences long, and she writes, "God only help me if this reaches the ears of the anti-Semites and their tongues start wagging." In some cases, there seemed to be no end of the violence. As a letter from Helena Sadowska that I quoted as the first quotation today reveals, "Without a horse, I cannot run my farm. The bandits visited me 9 times. And when she talks about the bandits, she talks about the right-wing Polish military units that today known as the cursed soldiers, who are glorified in today's Poland. So Sadowska was a typical middle-aged peasant woman, head of the household and chief breadwinner, struggling for physical survival and economic independence. And we can hear that struggle in the letter that she writes. The letters and testimonies provide brief but still vital accounts about the hostile stigmatizations of rescuers, its nature, and the effects on individuals. But of course, they do not provide statistical data about the extent of stigmatization and the extent of violence, verbal and physical. Some letters indicate gendered aspects of punishment meted out by Polish male members of the ethno-nationalistic moral police, the bandits, against Polish women who had rescued Jews. The most common gendered violence against female rescuers involved shaving their heads. Stanisław Chęcia, a peasant from Bełżyce, described how he, his wife, and their 2 daughters were disciplined for having saved a Jewish baby. After the war, Chęcia returned the child to his biological uncle, and the newly reunited Jewish family left for Paris. According to Chęcia, when the news reached his neighbors, homemade fascist bands invaded our home, demolished all our furniture, beat up everybody, and cut off my wife's and my daughter's hair, shouting that this is punishment for sheltering a Jewish child. As we know, during the Second World War, shaving hair was a punishment for collaborations with the Nazis. So here we have a unique situation, so we can also see that these women were never perceived as heroine, as patriots, were denied the status. They were actually perceived as traitors of the Polish nation because of what they did. Only one letter mentions the attempted rape of a female rescuer and female Jewish charges. The perpetrators did not necessarily consider a rape a punishment, but were merely taking advantage of the women's vulnerability. So this was a cursed sex for fun. Mrs. Jarzemska, a mature, lower middle-class woman who ran a kiosk selling cigarettes and drinks near Poniatowski Bridge in Warsaw, provided shelter to 2 young Jewish women, Regina and Eva Grice, aged 15 and 24, from Strachobichin near Lviv. And this is an excerpt from her letter. She's actually looking for the 2 women. "We were afraid of our own shadows, of each neighbor's, of each acquaintance, and of each stranger. Thanks to my level-headedness, I saved Maria by creating a safe exit for her from a tram that she had to jump off. I stopped the blackmailer with my body, shouting at him that due to his aggressive behavior, people were crowded in a tram. That's one vignette. And another vignette from this letter. We experienced continuous blackmail by the construction workers on Poniatowski Bridge. They recognized Maria's Semitic features and attempted to take advantage of the situation in every way they could. They blackmailed her and they blackmailed me in a disgusting way. Once they paid us a visit in my kiosk and began to shout at us. They not only wanted to blackmail us again, but attempted to rape us. We were in an oppressive situation when women on their own facing beast-like men. The end of quote. To conclude, the correspondence provides us with an anthropological material about the nature of relations between rescuers and their charges as they are emerging from the brutal war and the Holocaust, and about the ways the rescuers, the dedicated, selfless individuals, perceive themselves within their own communities and how they were perceived by members of their local communities. And of course, how they were perceived also by the Jewish charges and their families. In spite of the specific form of this correspondence, the letters reveal how the rescuers and rescued Jews communicated. In the latter case, they demonstrate the rush in which the accompanied short notes were written. The Jewish community was on the move, the Holocaust survivors. The audience to which the letters are written is the Jewish Central Committee and the other organizations. The audience is very important because it defines the language, the tone, and the content of the letters. The fact that the letters addressed to the Jewish committees asking for help can be seen as limiting their value, and yet it can also be seen as a throwing important light on rescue understood as sacred, as a precious early post-war account of rescue that the rescuers would not share with their neighbors, families, and members of Polish society, only with Jewish organizations. One can argue about the intrinsic weakness of this correspondence because of its individual and fragmentary nature, and yet when we look at it as a whole, we can get insights to the ways different social groups within the Polish community look at the rescue of Jews and the intricate relationships between rescuers and rescue and the biggest Polish community. This correspondence reveals how the people then felt and reveals the moral and social atmosphere around the rescue of Jews in Polish society. So the language of emotions in which rescuers and Jewish charges and their families express themselves must be an integral part of the analysis of this correspondence. So as a historian, I realized that I need to be versed in reading the emotions of the authors of these letters, how emotions are put to use in those letters, what emotions these letters elicit. Letters recording the actions of the selfless rescuers are important not only for the accounts of wartime dedication, but also for the disconcerting accounts of these individual subsequent experiences in the early post-war period. These letters are the first raw recorded testimony showing how rescuers were still being subjected to a heavy toll for their altruistic humanitarian actions in wartime because of their neighbors' anti-Semitism, jealousy and greed, and the unpredictable circumstances of the early post-war life and the personal lives. They also reveal that in the immediate post-war period, helping selfless rescuers of Jews had become a delicate and challenging logistical matter. Direct and publicly known assistance, especially in hamlets, villages and small towns where it was impossible to remain anonymous and to maintain strict privacy, could have brought down unpleasant repercussions in the form of robberies, verbal and physical abuse, and could have led to further misfortunes, including loss of home, and in the most extreme cases, a murder of the rescuer, and we know of such cases. Thus, the letters reveal the extent to which material assistance to rescuers becomes by necessity a careful and guarded project to be kept in a state of secrecy, not dissimilar to the situation maintained by selfless rescuers themselves during the Holocaust. Finally, these letters are invaluable documents debunking the hegemonic accounts of great solidarity of the entire Polish society with Jews that had crystallized at the end of the war, developed during the communist period, and which have continued in the post-communist debate on Polish-Jewish relations, and once again have become hegemonic narratives serving the politica historyczna of the current Polish government since 2015. Thank you.